Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Sunday with the Braid. I'm Susan Morgenstern, the Braid's producing director, and we are all so happy to have you here with us today. The program today is a conversation with Rukhl Schaechter, the Yiddish editor of the Forward newspaper, Forwards. Our moderator is Lisa Rosenbaum, author, playwright, and dramaturg with the Braid. As you're coming into the Zoom room, by all means, let us know where you're zooming in from by typing it into the chat. Thank you. And I have just a few technical items before we begin the actual conversation. We recommend that you watch the program in speaker view. That's controlled at the top right of your frame. Speaker view. Your audio function is set to mute. This is to ensure that everybody is able to hear our panelist and moderator without any accidental interruptions. The event is being recorded and will be made available very soon on our website YouTube page. If you would like to use Zoom's closed captioning feature, please select the CC button that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You might need to click on the word More and find it there. For after the conversation, we will take your questions for Rukhl, and please send those directly to me in the chat box. You can send those questions at any time during the event, and I'll collect them, and I'll get to as many as I can in the last 10 or 15 minutes or so. So that's it for me. I will see you later at the Q&A. For now, I am very happy to pass you along to our wonderful moderator, Lisa Rosenbaum. Take it away, Lisa.
All right. Thanks, Susan. Well, at the Forward newspaper, which my grandfather used to read religiously in Yiddish, Rachel Schaechter celebrates the vibrant world of contemporary Yiddish in the digital age. And so every day she produces stories, podcasts, news features, food tips, games, and words, literally. So before introducing you to her live, we're going to begin the day with a sample of her YouTube series inviting us to learn a Yiddish word of the day.
Shalom Aleichem. I'm Rachel Schaechter, editor of the Forwards. Welcome to Yiddish Word of the Day. Today we'll talk about shoes. A shoe in Yiddish is der Schuch, and the plural is die Schiech. Sneakers are die Gummischiech, which literally means the rubber shoes, or die Sportschiech. Sandals are die Sandalen. Flip-flops are die Fingerschiech. By the way, the word Fingerschiech was coined by yours truly when I was just 8 years old. My father, Mordechai Schaechter, was working on the dictionary with Uriel Weinreich in the 1960s, and they couldn't come up with a word for flip-flops. So when my father asked us, kids, what do we think of it? I said, how about Fingerschiech? And he liked it, and it got in. So that's one of the perks of being a lexicographer's daughter. I hope you enjoyed our Yiddish word of the day. Until we meet again, stay safe and healthy. And if you want to watch other Yiddish words of the day, be sure to subscribe to the Forwards YouTube channel. Seid gesund!
Rachel Schaechter, welcome to Sunday with the Braid.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you've now been the Yiddish editor of the Forwards, the Yiddish section of the Forward newspaper for over 25 years. It's the only mainstream Yiddish publication of its kind in the world. You're the first
Outside of the Hasidic community, of course.
Right. But you're the first woman and the first Sabbath observant Jew to hold an editorial position at a paper that I know was historically not only secular, but decidedly more left-leaning in nature. We just heard you say that your father was a Yiddish lexicographer, a real Yiddishist, and he created a modern Yiddish dictionary, I understand, and he taught at Columbia so it could continue to be a living language. That
Yes.
really struck me because so many immigrant parents don't want their kids to speak their language, and your home was just the opposite. It was Yiddish only. I think you had to put a penny in a jar if you spoke English. You could have walked away from that legacy, but you've embraced it. And the first question I have for you is, why do you love Yiddish?
The question is, why didn't I rebel against it, right? Because most of my friends did not speak Yiddish.
Mhm.
My father was very clever. What he did was he was kind of like a Pied Piper, aside from being a professor and a lexicographer. Every Shabbos afternoon, he would collect all the Yiddish-speaking kids of the neighborhood, children of Holocaust survivors, and he would take us to Van Cortlandt Park, which is a large park in the Bronx. He would call it Engebengeland. Engebenge is a counting rhyme that you find in Shalom Aleichem stories, kind of like Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo. Engebenge, Stupa, Stenga, Arze, Barze, Gole, Schwarze, Egel, Begel, Fegel, Chick. You're it. So he would take us there, and everything was in Yiddish. We would play hide and seek, tag, word games, and he loved nature, so we would just hike through the woods, and everything was in Yiddish, and it was really important for us to have peers with whom to speak Yiddish to. I think that in many of these immigrant homes, all they have is their parents and grandparents, so they see it as something old world. The other thing that was working against them, against the immigrant families transmitting the Yiddish, is that many of these parents who spoke Yiddish really wanted their kids to Americanize. And they were afraid of it, that if they didn't learn English quickly, they would be stuck. My father had no such fears. He wasn't working class. He was a professor. He understood the importance of maintaining culture. He knew psychology enough, linguistic psychology, or psycholinguistics, I think, that children can definitely learn more than one language at a time. So I think that accounts for why many Yiddish speakers from immigrant homes no longer speak Yiddish.
Yeah, yeah, or they understand it and they can't speak it.
Right.
But one of the other things that I thought was very interesting is you mentioned your father sort of had 2 feet in the secular world as well as a professor. And he said, I think that he was an atheist. He was not a religious man. And yet every Shabbat he made Kiddush and he made said Hamotzi. What was his explanation to you for why he did that?
Okay, so he was making a beautiful Kiddush, a beautiful hamotzi, very authentic. I didn't realize that. He never heard that at home because he came from a secular Yiddishist home. He learned it from his brother-in-law, his sister's husband. His sister is Bela Schaechter Gottesman, the well-known Yiddish poet. He was kind of really a Talmud Chacham, as we say, really knew Torah very well because his father was extremely Orthodox, we would say Haredi, but he himself, like many of his generation in Europe, rebelled and became a physician, secular, completely secular, but he still had that in him.
Mhm.
So he taught my father how to make Kiddush and Motzi to sound like he was an Orthodox Jew. So he fooled me all these years. And then as I started becoming more interested in religion and asking him about God and about Jewish, about the Torah, and then he said, "Stop it. You don't know I'm an atheist?" I said, "You are?" He said, "Yes." I said, "So why did you make Kiddush and Motzi every year, every week?" He said, "For you." And that was like an eye opener. I didn't see that as hypocritical at all. It was very wise. No matter what my belief system is, if I want my children to be Jewish, they need to know what the religious tradition is. It doesn't mean they have to practice it when they grow up, but it's my job to teach it to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you had Yiddish in the home, but the community that you lived in also was not like you didn't live in an ultra Orthodox
No.
community or a Hasidic community. It's not like you could walk out your door and speak Yiddish. And you got a degree at Barnard in psychology, became a teacher. Your husband, I understand, was from communist Poland, so he came with no background in religion. But
Right.
you made the decision. I don't know if there's some connection there, race orthodoxy, and I would like to know was the connection between becoming observant and your love of Yiddish.
Yes, there is a connection. I would say as I became an adult and I saw Yiddish is not something that most Jews do, how am I going to connect to other Jews? I needed to hold on to something. And language is not enough. And religion had already sparked something in me, and I started exploring that possibility, but I was just getting my feet wet. I really wasn't taking it seriously. It was my sister Adel. There are four of us. I'm the oldest, Rukhl. Then comes Gittel. Gittel is the one who actually edited this great dictionary that my father worked on. And then came Adel, and my brother is Benjamin. Some of you may know Benjamin Schaechter is uh, is the director of the Yiddish Philharmonic Chorus. So Adel was the one who, she was an artist and she was very unhappy with the secular lifestyle, and she became Orthodox first. And when she was studying with Rebbitzin, the rabbi's wife, and she decided to become completely, like I would say, Haredi. Does everybody know what Haredi is? Ultra Orthodox, yeah. She ended up in Israel. She met her husband there. He was also from New York. And they got married and they raised 7 children, and she now has many grandchildren. She's very happy. Then Gittel married somebody who was born a Brahmin in India, and he converted to Judaism, and he became an Orthodox Jew. So Gittel became Orthodox. And again, it was something that I was thinking about all the time, but I was a little nervous because of Leon, my husband. And then we moved to a new neighborhood, and the closest shul was an Orthodox shul. And I knew that I had not been happy with other synagogues. Not even if I liked the people there and I liked the rabbi, I just didn't feel that there was enough knowledge among the congregants, that there was enough observance among the congregants for me to make that leap and become Shomer Shabbos. But once I came to this shul, it was the Young Israel Oaf Tzedek in North Riverdale, which is where I live. I live actually on the border of Riverdale and Yonkers, but you're in California, so you don't know the difference.
I know
Anyway,
the
anyway, so I walked into the shul and I was struck that after the service, 3 people came over and invited me for Shabbos lunch. I had never had that experience. And I said, this is home. This is where I belong. I also like the fact that they still many Orthodox synagogues use Ashkenazi pronunciation. And they say Good Shabbos and Good Yontif. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach is okay, but it's not what I grew up with. So that also was one of the reasons that I chose an Orthodox synagogue. And I called my sister up, Adel, in Israel, and I told her, guess what? I'm throwing out my pots and pans. I'm starting all over. I'm going to bring all the pots and pans and the dishes to the mikveh. And so now you can eat in my house. And, and she started to cry. And she said, do you know that every Friday night when I was lighting the candles, I prayed to God that Rukhl would become religious.
Oh, that's so interesting. What did your father think of this? I mean, his children
It's a good question.
done the whole, I mean, I know I was raised in a very atheist home, and I ended up joining a synagogue, and my parents, they were amused when they said, where have we gone
Amused
wrong?
is a good word.
Yeah, where have we
Yeah.
gone wrong? So, yeah, but
He
very,
didn't think it was
lovely.
wrong. No. It was very important to him that his daughters and his son marry Jews. And if it meant becoming Orthodox, if that would raise, not there's no guarantee, but if that raised the possibility that we would find Jewish spouses, he was all for it. I believe it even says in his will, he had an ethical will that said that the money will be distributed to all the children who have married Jews, who are either born Jews or who converted according to tradition. So it was something that was very important to him, and it was more important to him than transmitting atheism. Atheism is something it was a part of him. He couldn't make himself believe, but he wasn't against other people believing. He was a very open-minded man, and he wanted people to feel Jewish whichever way they could, hopefully through Yiddish. That was his
Yeah.
marker. But if being religious helps promote and preserve the Yiddish language, and I believe it does, then why not?
Yeah. But it also seems that what he saw was that it needs, and what you've seen is that it needs a community. You can't just
Mm-hmm.
Yiddish. There has to be
Exactly.
some community to live in so that it can
Yes.
stay alive. And I
Yes.
guess that's what you would find in an Orthodox community as opposed to
Correct.
Reform congregation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to see, how do you keep a language alive when it is not being spoken every day by people who in a secular world. So that's a little bit of what I'd like to ask you now, how you came to the Forward and what was your vision for what you could create of that position there as the Yiddish editor at the Forward.
No,
Uh,
I didn't come as an editor. I came as a reporter.
Okay, so tell us,
Yeah.
how did you come to the Forward in the first place?
So I was teaching Yiddish in a Jewish day school called Kinneret Day School here in Riverdale. It was only once a week. So the kids were just getting a auf ein Spitzmesser, on the tip of the knife. Very little of Yiddish. But one day I got a call from Boris Sandler, who was the editor-in-chief of the Yiddish section of the Forward. And he told me, I'd already heard that the editor, he had not, well, so what happened was he was not the editor-in-chief. The editor-in-chief had just passed away. His name was Mordechai Strigler. And suddenly, this young man from the former Soviet Union, who had been brought in just as a reporter, was suddenly thrust into the position of editor-in-chief. And he called me up and he said, I need young blood. Can you come and work with me? I was a little nervous because I was a short story writer in Yiddish. I was a songwriter in Yiddish. I had never done journalism, but he convinced me and I came and I never looked back.
Yeah. So what did you, but then slowly, how did the Yiddish part come? And what did you think you could make of that? Because you've now initiated all these programs to bring more people into the world of Yiddish language and culture. How did that evolve?
I knew that digital was the way to go. I came in 1998, and Boris believed that too. He was doing his own mini videos, and he said to me, "I know you like to cook. Would you like to do a cooking show?" And so I called Eve Jachnowitz, who is a Yiddish food scholar, and she actually, for her PhD at NYU, she translated a vegetarian cookbook that was published in Vilna before the war in Yiddish, and she translated it into English. That was her dissertation. So anyway, I brought her in and I said, let's do a show together. And we did. I think we did about 40 episodes of strudel and fluden and challah and babka and bialys. So we have a link to our cooking shows that you can see in the chat box. And that made me feel like this is a way you can reach people who may not know Yiddish, but feel very connected to Yiddish. And that was my goal. Boris was very focused on keeping it in Yiddish, articles in Yiddish. And I wanted that too, but I felt we also needed articles in English. But it was hard for him because he did not speak English well. He had just come over from Israel, from the former Soviet Union. He went to Israel and then he came here. But many years later, when I became the editor of the Yiddish section of the Forward, I decided that there would be English and Yiddish articles and many more videos. We actually started Yiddish Word of the Day during COVID because we were concerned about viewers who were depressed, who couldn't go to work, who couldn't see their grandchildren, and we had this brainstorming session at the Forward. What can we do for them? And Rob Eshman is the one who turned to me and said, Rachel, why don't you do a Yiddish Word of the Day? And I said, I can't. I can't have my videographer come into the house. So he said, you don't need a videographer. Just go to photo booth and press the button. And that's how the program was started. And every day I would come up with a new one. So now we have about 140.
Yeah.
episodes of Yiddish Word of the Day.
Yeah, well, the combination of the food and the Yiddish word of the day. The food, I know you had a certain very famous violinist, I imagine, I seem to recall, came on.
Yeah.
Tell us about that a little bit first, and then we'll get to Yiddish word of the day.
Yes. We had this idea, if we could find Yiddish speaking celebrities, wouldn't it be great to ask them what their favorite food was? Like Ashkenazi food. We got a hold of Yitzhak Perlman. He's in Juilliard at the Juilliard School. He teaches there. And I don't even remember how we got to him. We must have found his agent. And it was much easier than I thought. So we met him at the Juilliard School and we did two episodes with him, one after another, both for Pesach. One was like a Pesach kind of latke, and the other one, oh, I don't remember. I would have to look it up.
Maybe somebody, his mother's recipe or grandmother's recipe, something like that, that he would.
Yeah. He said his mother was a great cook. He was living in Israel. He was born and raised in Israel, but his
Yeah.
parents were Polish Jews. So he said there was a lot of schmaltz in the house. I remember that. Everything that they made, his mother made, was with this schmaltz, which means that they probably didn't eat it with sour cream. Not that he's so religious, but I don't think that they would have mixed meat with milk.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fun. But food is a great topic to bring people together and
Yes.
about which everybody has an opinion. Yeah. So, you've since made quite a few different kinds of programs. Tell us a little bit about them. I mean, you have news, you have blog, you have podcasts, you have just talk about the programs you have because there's so many.
Okay.
We don't know how you have hours in the day to do all this.
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's important to me, and so I make the time. We have a Yiddish wordle that's very popular. The truth is, you don't have to be fluent in Yiddish. You just need to know the aleph beis, because the way it works, you have six chances to guess a five-letter word. So if you just put in any words that you know, and you could use a Yiddish dictionary if you need help, just put in words, and you may actually end up getting it. I can tell, we can see how many people see all of our stuff, and a lot of people go to Wordle, Yiddish Wordle. We also have the Yiddish word of the day, as you said. We have something called tidbits, which these are for Yiddish students. These are short, easy news briefs in Yiddish that comes with an audio of myself reading it aloud, slowly, so they can look at the text, they can hear me, and I do it in standard Yiddish, even though my usual Yiddish is Durim Yiddish, Southern Yiddish. In other words, I don't say ich kum, I say ich kim. So for many people, it's hard if they're studying Yiddish, they're learning the standard Yiddish. I don't want to bombard them with a dialect, so I do everything in standard Yiddish. But if I were speaking in front of a Yiddish speaking audience, I would speak in my own dialect. So the tidbits are also very popular. I hear that certain teachers, Yiddish instructors, assign it to their students, which is great as homework. And it's a way of having them engaged in Yiddish outside of the classroom. And they can listen as many times as they need to until they pick it up. Which leads me to the podcast. We had a pilot of 12 episodes. The podcast is also for students, but I would say this is more for advanced Yiddish students who never have a chance to hear Yiddish by a native speaker. So at each session, I would read two articles that have some related theme aloud. Usually they were like 15, 20 minutes, and we got a lot of positive feedback. Maybe at some point we will actually make a program out of it, but it did take a lot out of me when you're saying how many hours a day do I have? It's a lot of work. So right now we just have those 24 articles. It was 12 episodes with two articles each for people to work with. And we have the cooking shows, and let's see, what else do we have? And then we have the regular Yiddish articles, which are written by either academics or journalists who know Yiddish, or just Yiddishists who learned a very good Yiddish. We have one Yiddishist in Berlin called Jake Schneider, who's always sending us very interesting articles about life in Berlin, including, there's they just put up Yiddish street signs in the old Jewish quarter of Berlin. It took a lot of work, but these street signs are with Yiddish letters. I mean, it really says it in Yiddish. Why it was in Yiddish and not in German? Because these were Eastern European Jews that were living in Berlin at the turn of the century, waiting to get their Schiffskarte, their ship tickets to America. And while they were there for many months. So a whole community sprung up with Stieblach. Stieblach are little, very Hamish synagogues in homes. There were kosher butchers, and there was a lot of Yiddish spoken on the streets, and it was documented. So they decided that that quarter, that it was really a German quarter. It was part of Berlin, but for a certain period of time, of I believe 30, 40 years, there were many Yiddish speakers there. So Jake, I wouldn't have known about it. Jake wrote about it. So it's wonderful to have, and he's young compared to me. And I think it's great that young people are so excited about Yiddish and willing to write in Yiddish for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the focus for the larger Jewish community in the Holocaust world has been turning away from Yiddish and towards Hebrew, towards learning
Right.
Hebrew. But clearly there's a change in attitude. I mean, you must be seeing it a lot in terms of the younger generation. And I wonder, you've mentioned this a little bit, but how to balance I mean, I'd like to know what you're seeing, but also how to balance your programming between the real Yiddishists who know and speak the language and are sort of steeped in it, and people who have no background at all, how to welcome them in. How do you balance that with what you do at the Forward? Because it's not easy.
Fa-
It's
Yes,
not,
right. So Facebook is my medium. It's
uh,
the one that I feel most comfortable with. So everything we produce, the Yiddish articles, the English language articles, which are about Yiddish, Yiddish word of the day, the cooking shows, all of them go onto that page, the Forwards page, as well as my own page, which is simply Rachel Schaechter. And a third page I started because, as you know, on Facebook, a person can only get up to 5,000 friends. After that, you have to start deleting. That was hindering me because there were people coming in with more than 5,000. So we started something called the Forwards Yiddish Word of the Day. I had to put the forward first because there are a couple of groups called Yiddish Word of the Day. So it's called the Forwards Yiddish Word of the Day. So everything that we publish goes into all three of those pages. So that means anybody who doesn't even know me, I never heard of the Forwards, but happens to be scrolling on Facebook, could find us, could find whatever it is that we do. And that's how we bring people in.
yeah, yeah. And you're seeing large numbers of young people coming to Yiddish?
Right now, most of them are older because Facebook has become the medium for people over 60. The younger people are more on Instagram.
Yes.
So we are soon going to be seeking a younger person who would take over that realm. Because it's something, there's just a limit to how much I could do. Uh, so if we can get a really robust Instagram account, I think that's the way to bring the young people in, and not just secular young Jews, but even Orthodox young Jews. So many Orthodox women use Instagram for their baking, their expertise, and they show pictures of what they baked and they sell them or whatever it is they do. It's become a very popular medium for them as well.
Yeah. I mean, you are sort of in a very unique position with regard to the Orthodox community. Yiddish is the great uniter in a sense. You can reach the ultra-Orthodox and the Hasidic communities
Yes.
in ways that other Jews cannot. And I mean, they're listening to your programming? Are they,
It's hard to know because if they are, they don't want us to know. In
Uh,
other words, those people who are still in the Hasidic community, they have computers. They are looking at things they probably shouldn't be, that the Rebbe wouldn't want them to be looking at. So I happen to know about those that are off the derech, meaning that they left the community, but they're still very excited about Yiddish. They really like it. Ricky Rose is one example. We discovered her back in 2016. She is from a Satmar family, and she, even though she left the Satmar community, her Yiddish is beautiful and she loves to speak Yiddish and she sings beautifully. Yeah, obviously, she couldn't record anything in the Hasidic community because there's a rule against women singing because it might entice the men. So now that she is secular, she can sing as much as she wants. And she actually does chazonis. She does cantorial music. She's also very funny. And so we've had her on many times. We've done videos with her. The first video we ever did of her was putting on makeup in the mirror. Like you're watching her putting on makeup and she does it in Yiddish. It was so charming.
that.
And then after that, I had her do a cooking show in Yiddish. And I just let her fly. She's so creative. We just had actually on Friday, was it? I think Thursday or Friday, we produced a new video with her and her sister Mimi baking chocolate chunk cookies in their Satmar Yiddish in the kitchen, and it's just delightful to watch them. They're giggling, and it's all in Yiddish. It's great.
Did her sister also leave the community?
Don't think so. In other words, she always dresses modestly, but you never know. I mean,
Yeah.
some people who leave the community might still feel uncomfortable wearing other kind, immodest clothing.
But
So I
information
don't.
about your what you're doing is probably leaking back into that community. Certainly
It
through,
is, and so I don't know how many of them are
yeah.
watching us. I listen in the Hasidic community. They have so many of their own newspapers that there's plenty of for them to read, and many of them are now on the computer. There was a time where they said, "No, no, the internet is bringing our youth away." I think they finally realized that the internet is the way to go. So
Yeah.
there are Yiddish newspapers on the internet by the Hasidic community.
I just wonder whether if there's at some point there might be a little bit of a bridge that you're creating to between
I
Orthodox.
had hoped, yes, I had hoped to do that. The
Yeah.
only way I could do it really is if I was in connection with somebody like Ricky who could bring them in. So she does have her own Instagram account, which is very popular. We're going to try that. We're going to see once I have an Instagram person, work together with her and see how we can reach that community. But I don't know how many people can come to Ricky from the that are still Hasidic. It's not sneistic, it's not modest. So they may love watching her, but they would have to do it in secret.
Yeah.
So it's a little difficult. But there is another group of young Jews that are coming to us, and those are the young people who are not Zionists and are still very Jewish and are seeking forms of Jewish identity that they can live with. And so for them, Yiddish, which was a Golis Sprach, a language of the diaspora, speaks to them. And many of them do study Yiddish and want to learn about the Jewish Labor Bund, which was a socialist Yiddishist movement in Eastern Europe before the war.
Say the Bundes would be that's yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. And I think many people now know the word doekate, here-ness. Do means here, and doekate was a motto of the Bund. It meant we are not going to run away to some fantasy that's going to be Israel, because nobody believed that Israel would ever exist. They said, we're not going to run away from Poland. We're going to stay here and we're going to build it and we're going to demand equal rights with the Poles. And so that was their attitude. We're going to stay here and fight, and we're going to do it in Yiddish. Those were the Bundists, whereas the Zionists were the ones who said there is no future here. We
Yeah.
have to try to find a different homeland. As you may know, it wasn't just Israel. They were trying different possibilities. There were possibilities of countries in Africa that they might be able to turn in, have a Yiddish section, not Yiddish, a Jewish section there.
Yeah,
It didn't.
Galveston, Texas, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're all over the place. But it is interesting. I mean, that Jewish pride that the Bundes had is so
Yes,
understandable, and more than understandable. It's something to be proud of. Their point of view was a good one. Unfortunately, history didn't agree. So,
agree. That's
um,
right. That's
yeah,
right. And many of these non-Zionists or anti-Zionists don't know that many Bundists ended up settling in Israel after the war because many of their family lived, a lot of their family members lived there, and it was a thriving Yiddish-speaking community. There were many Yiddish-speaking organizations. Tel Aviv especially had many Bundists, and there was an office for the Bund, and they had their meetings there, and they had parties there. So it was possible to be a Bundist within Israel.
how does that work? I mean, what does it
Because
stand
they
for?
already accepted the fact there is a state, so it's not a fantasy anymore. In other words, they weren't against the idea of Jews having a home of their own. They just said, we have limited resources. If we're going to do something, let's do something that we can actually manage. But as you say, the Holocaust came and wiped it all away. So Israel did serve a function. And so they found a home there that they could live in and that they could still practice the idea of socialism. The kibbutzim were all socialist.
Yeah, but they
So
weren't speaking Yiddish there.
they did not speak Yiddish. There is one called Yad Mordechai,
Uh,
named after Mordechai Analevich, who was one of the fighters in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And in the beginning, it was filled with Yiddish speaking members. But their children, of course, don't speak Yiddish because Yiddish, although Israel does have Yiddish organizations today, many of them are children of Yiddish speaking Holocaust survivors who answered them in Hebrew, just like in America, they answered them in English, and in France, they answered them in French.
the same
Uh,
phenomenon as in your house, in other words.
Yeah, no, so my father was going against the trend. What he did was he and my
Yeah,
mother
right.
moved to this community knowing it was an intentional Yiddish community. He knew that he bought a house 3 houses away from his sister, Bela Schaechter Gottesman, who I mentioned before, the poet, and next to her was Schickel and Gela Fishman. Schickel, Joshua Fishman, was a great sociolinguist in the real world, but he was also a Yiddishist. So all three families were raising their kids in Yiddish, and because we were on the same block, we ended up playing ball together in Yiddish.
Ah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you this. I know you are an award-winning Yiddish short story writer and a songwriter. You mentioned that before. I'm just curious, how does Yiddish allow you to express yourself differently than you would in English?
It's probably easier for me to express myself in English because I live in an English speaking country. So my English is better than my Yiddish. If I'm working, so if I decide to do something in Yiddish, it's intentional. It's something that I want to do because I want to create something in Yiddish. If I have trouble with a word, or if I just can't find the right phrase, there are dictionaries, there are thesauruses, there's a lot of resources that I can use to help me.
And where do you send out your writing? I mean, is it in the Foverts
Oh,
or
about the
other
songs, I haven't written a song in many years.
places?
There is a Yiddish
Short story.
organization. There's a Yiddish organization called Jugendruf, Youth for Yiddish. Jugendruf means youth call. It's been around. My father actually helped start it together with David Roskis, who was a member of it at the time. And that's 1964. They felt it was very important to have an organization where young people could meet to socialize in Yiddish. It was started in the Bronx, and and it was very important because through Jugendruf, we now have for the past, I think, almost 50 years, a Yiddish retreat. It's like a Yiddish camp for a whole week called Yiddishwoch, which means Yiddish week, and about 150 or 160 Yiddish speakers, families, singles, senior citizens live together for a whole week in a wonderful camp in it's called Copake, New York, and it's in the mountains with a beautiful lake and a heated pool. It's great. and everything's in Yiddish. Volleyball, discussions about the Holocaust, the dining room, board games, and it's wonderful to have that to go to every summer. It really is a shot in the arm, not just for us adults, but also for the kids that are coming up there. This is their one chance a year that they could be with other kids in Yiddish. And of course, we have to remind them, Nishkin English, no English here. You have to speak Yiddish. It's hard because they're so excited about seeing other kids. It's hard to believe that they actually know Yiddish. So that's something that Jungturf, I would say, the greatest gift that Jungturf has provided for the Yiddishist community is the Yiddishvach.
That's beautiful. So, yeah, but there's also, I mean, there's YIVO and there was, what was it called? The Yiddish festival. They also had a camp. Yeah, I can't remember.
You talk about Yiddish land?
No, they had it on the West Coast, and it was on the East Coast. It was also a camp with music and
Oh, wait, so you're talking about a summer camp?
Yidstock, Yid something. Ugh, can't
Oh,
remember.
Yiddstock, that's the Yiddish Book Center. The
Yeah,
Yiddish Book Center has a Yiddish
Yiddish
festival
Book
called
Center
Yiddstock.
has, yeah, but this was it was a weekend thing, I think, that used to be everyone would speak Yiddish as well, and I'm absolutely blanking on the name. But yeah, I mean, obviously there are things happening that have been kept alive, that it's really beautiful. I mean, this is a language that everyone was predicting was going to die. And
Right.
it's like the Jewish people, it prevails. And it keeps, because people want to keep it alive. And
Right.
yeah, I'm just curious. I hear that you also have been sort of championing young writers to continue writing in Yiddish. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's why I spoke about Jake Schneider in Berlin.
Yeah.
And he's only one of several young people that I've been bringing in. You know, it's not easy to learn a language so well that you can write articles in them. But, you know, by word of mouth, I speak to professors, I find out who has talent, and I ask them to write for us. Every once in a while, I have a student who will write something for me that does have a lot of errors, but that's part of the learning process. And my hope is that I'm a very tough editor. So as I point out the mistakes, I'm hoping that they are writing it down somewhere so that they will learn and eventually become very good Yiddish writers. And of
Yeah.
course, we have to look towards the younger generation to do that because, you know, I'm not going to be here forever. I wish I were, but I'm not. And I also wanted to bring up the point that when I married my husband, Leon, who his Yiddish name is Label, I call him Label, I told him, just be aware, I'm going to speak Yiddish to our kids. And he looked at me and he said, and he knew Yiddish from home, but he was very embarrassed to speak it, like many immigrants. He was raised in Poland actually after the war. So everybody spoke Polish, but his relatives, the older generation, spoke Yiddish and he liked them. So he wanted to understand what they were saying and what the jokes were. So he learned very good passive knowledge of Yiddish, but he didn't speak it well. So he says to me, this is while we were dating, he said, why would you want to speak an old person's language? And I said, those are fighting words. If you want this relationship to continue, you have to know I'm going to speak Yiddish to my children. And what
Okay.
ended up happening was when my first child was born, Menachem Yankel, uh, Label was holding him in his arms in the hospital. And suddenly he started speaking to him in Yiddish. And I said, what? I thought that you would rather speak English or Polish to him. And he said, I thought I did, but once I saw this baby in my arms, Yiddish was what came to mind. And I was
That
just
is
so touched
so,
by that.
so
So
beautiful.
we ended up raising all three. We have three sons, Naftali, Menachem Yankel, Naftali, and Gedalia. All three of them are fluent in Yiddish. I told all of them that when they graduated college, I expected them to take the Yiva summer program, which is a very intensive ulpan, as you might call it, 5 days a week, 3 hours every morning, extracurricular Yiddish activities in the afternoon. I said, all three of you have to take it, and I will pay for it. Because if you are serious about wanting your children or grandchildren even to know Yiddish, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And
Right.
so I paid for them. And when two of them have already married, and I'm so delighted that both of my daughters-in-law took the same program. And so they are raising their own children in Yiddish.
That's what I was going to ask you, whether your grandchildren speak
They
Yiddish.
speak the
I love it.
beautiful Yiddish. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I think we need to give our audience a little bit of a chance to ask you some
Sure.
questions. So I want to thank you. It has been such a pleasure to talk to you, Rachel.
Same here.
Yeah. So now I want to thank Susan Morgenstern and Isaiah Maldonado, who've been working behind the scenes to keep us all in good shape today and make this program possible. I'm going to turn things over now to Susan so she can have some of the questions from the chat come across to you. So take it away, Susan.
Great. Thanks so much, Lisa. There have been, the chat has been very, very busy. This is such a wonderful program. I see we could have gone on and on and on, but you've already answered the number one question, which was, does Rukhl have children? Do they speak Yiddish? And I just love that you told the story of your three sons and how they're all fluent in Yiddish. So thank you for that. People were very interested in that. The other really big conversation in our chat box is about where can I learn Yiddish in Los Angeles. And there's been some suggestions in the chat, like the Culver City Senior Center, and I think there's a place called the Workers Circle on Robertson, and then someone else said Google it, and but where can I go? And I said, well, let me ask Rukhl if you
Of
have a
course.
favorite place. I
Listen,
know you're not here, but you may know the Los Angeles area.
okay. Thanks to COVID, we now have wonderful online Yiddish courses. And I think that this is really the best possibility for you. If you can find something local, great, but don't limit yourself. The Workers Circle has dozens of Yiddish courses for every possible level. Yiva has wonderful courses on a very high level. Even the beginners, they go fast. But if you're serious, I would say go to Yiva. So you have Yiva, you have the Workers Circle, you have the Yiddish Book Center. They have courses. Those are three organizations that I would start with. If you have the time to spend a summer, you then come to the Yiva summer program. They used to do it after COVID. They did have it hybrid. You could do it online or in person. They've stopped it. This year, it's only in person. So if you have the time to go to New York, then I would recommend the Yiva summer program. As I said, it did wonders for my family. There is also, if you're willing to travel, in Warsaw, they have Yiddish programs. And in Tel Aviv, they have a wonderful Yiddish program at Tel Aviv University. And if you just go to my Yiddish brief, I didn't mention this. I have a newsletter that comes out every Sunday morning called the Yiddish Brief. And in it, I tell you about courses that people send me about. In other words, I may not have known about it. In Canada, in Toronto, they have Yiddish courses that are very inexpensive, taught by Yiddish scholars. Just come to the Yiddish Brief and you'll see, whatever I post there is stuff that's happening in the Yiddish world. I have a calendar there of all sorts of online and in-person programming, both in Yiddish or in English about Yiddish. I've posted videos in Yiddish, the latest videos, articles that were written. Let's say there was an article about Yiddish in the Wall Street Journal. You'll find the link with me. I'm the one who
Fantastic.
curates it all.
That's so wonderful, and I'm thrilled that this program revealed so much interest, which I'm sure is your mission, is that more people
Absolutely.
be interested in learning Yiddish. I wanted to answer a question that somebody suggested that the camp you were thinking of, Lisa, was Kles Camp, or that's it. Lisa says, yeah,
That's
that's
it.
Ah,
That's it.
class
Class
camp.
camp. Class
Kles
camp.
Camp.
Right.
Fantastic.
So class camp closed, and so
Uh,
what came up in its place is Yiddish New York. And that is hybrid. That is both in person and it's amazing. Also, hundreds of
Yeah.
workshops and not just about klezmer music, but about Yiddish language, Yiddish film, theater, dance, food. It's amazing. And that comes in the last week in December. and definitely worth researching.
Great, fantastic. I had a great question from staff member David Chu about, he was talking about being in Lithuania, visiting his family homeland on his mother's side, and how there are different versions of the language spoken east and west. And he was wondering, are there different variations of the Yiddish language, and how was the decision made as to which one would be standard Yiddish?
Very good question. It's a long answer, but I'll try to do it off ein Fuss, on one foot,
The Cliff Notes.
the Cliff Notes. Most people say there's Litvak and a Galiciana. Litvak, Lithuanian, Galiciana, Polish. It's much more complicated than that, but I would say there are three different dialects. One is Litvish Yiddish, which is Ich kum, as I said before. Then you have my Yiddish, which is Romanian, Hungarian Yiddish, which is called Southern Yiddish, Durim Yiddish, and that is Kim Tsumir. And then you have Polish Yiddish, which says Kim Tsumir, but they also say Ashain Meidel, whereas those people in Romania and in Ukraine would say Shane Meidel, not Shine Meidel. So that's what I'm saying. But my father was a specialist in dialects, so he studied the dialects of every shtetl. Every shtetl had their own style of speaking Yiddish.
Wow.
And he would tell me, he'd be sitting on the subway and he'd see an older gentleman reading a Yiddish newspaper and he'd start speaking to him. And the man would say something and my father would say, "Ah, I see you're from Chlubyeshev." And he would say, "How do you know that?" And he said, "I can tell." In other words, it's so fine-tuned. If you study the linguistics of each dialect, you'll be able to pinpoint, just like we know here in New York, let's say here in the United States, we can see, oh, that's a Southern Yiddish, English. That's a Brooklyn English.
Right.
That's a Chicago English. But there, we do it with Yiddish. There are many different ways of marking what the dialect was. It's fascinating. I'm not a linguist, so the question really would need to be asked of a Yiddish linguist.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. There's several questions about the relationship. If you have involvement with the Yiddish Center in Northampton, Massachusetts, and somebody was concerned about the impact on that Yiddish Center because I think there's a closure happening of
Every college
Northampton
is
College.
closing.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
You talk about Hampshire College?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Hampshire.
yeah, Hampshire College closed. Many students who went to Hampshire found out about Yiddish because the Yiddish Book Center was right there.
Right.
But they did not work together. The Yiddish Book Center is doing very well. And aside from getting graduates or students coming over from Hampshire College, there was no official connection there. So thank God the Yiddish Book Center is doing very well. They have great fundraisers. And I wish them the best. I use them all the time because they have digitized thousands of Yiddish books that are out of print. And so anytime I want to read a book by the poet Avram Sutzkever or something by Denister, who was a fantasy Yiddish writer from the Soviet Union, I just go there and I start scrolling and I find what I need. I download it and I got it. I can print it out, staple it, and it's free. So it's not just for me, it's for many people who do research and need certain books. What a gift that the Yiddish Book
Fantastic.
Center has provided. And I should say Steven Spielberg provided because he funded it.
Fantastic. Someone was asking if you knew Miri Koral, who's has a translation company here
Yeah.
and is, I think, connected to Der Nister that you mentioned.
Yes. Well, Zach Golden of Dentista, I know him and I know her. And I think it's great that LA is showing so much interest in Yiddish. You had a Yiddish day a couple of months ago, right?
Yes. And we
That's
at the
great.
Braid had a program of all Yiddish music done
Oh,
by our wonderful artist Cindy Paley, who sang a lot of Yiddish songs. So, yeah,
nice.
there's a lot of interest.
Yeah, I also
Yeah, yeah.
interviewed Susan Bronson, who's now the head of the Yiddish Book Center.
Yes.
That's right.
Program. That's
That's right. That's right.
wonderful.
Um, Well, we could go on and on. We are, I see, going to run just a minute or two, over time. But I just have to say, everyone was so enthusiastic about this program. Rachel, what was the name of the woman singer that you mentioned at one point? I
From
think
the
I know.
Hasidic community,
Yes.
Ricky Rose.
Ricky Rose. Thank you. Someone was very excited to know that. Well, I see, I'm going to ask Isaiah to post all the links in the chat again. And I'm going to make sure that in the follow-up email that you'll all get following the program, that we send you those links as well, because they're the best ways to access all the wonderful work that Rukhl is doing.
And right now I'm writing Ricky Rose's name so that they can Google her because
Thank you.
yeah.
Great. I just want to let you know that at the Braid, what we have upcoming is we're going to open our final salon show of the season, which is called L'Chaim America, and celebrates the America that's in our hearts. And we've just started rehearsals. The show's very exciting. Isaiah will post a link in the chat to where you can buy tickets for that if you aren't a subscriber with us. And we're all over Los Angeles between May 12th and June 17th. We have a very special program that includes that full show at the Skirball Center on June 7th. So just take a look at our website and you'll get all the information about L'Chaim America. And finally, this is very quickly, as I get ready to send you on your way for the rest of your beautiful Sunday, I want to say this. We're very proud to offer this program, Sunday with the Braid, free of charge. But there are many of you who voluntarily purchased a virtual ticket. And I want you to know we see that. We're very, very grateful. Anyone can make a donation and support our work anytime by going to the-braid.org. No donation too small or large. Isaiah will post a link in the chat for that. And thank you for whatever you're able to send our way, because that helps us continue our mission to leave no Jewish story untold, like Rukhl Schaechter's. And what a beautiful story that's been to hear. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Lisa, for a wonderful conversation. As always, to our artistic director, Rhonda Spinak, who leads us in all things and made this all possible. And especially to Rukhl Schaechter, who was such an engaging guest. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much.